Έχουμε μαζί μας, όπως βλέπετε όσοι έχετε μπει μέχρι στιγμής, έχουμε τον Ken Miller και την Wendy Batts από την Αμερική. Είναι πολύ νωρίς, πολύ πρωί για αυτούς εκεί πέρα, αλλά είναι εδώ μαζί μας για να μοιραστούν απλόχερα την γνώση. And maybe Wendy and Ken doesn't understand what I'm saying, but I say good things about you, that it's very early there where you are, but you are very kind, both of you, to be here with us and share all this knowledge and all this information. So thank you again for being a part of this. And I was telling to these people that we are doing this for almost 10 years now. We are collaborating with NASM, and we are representing the National Academy of Sports Medicine in Greece and in Cyprus. And through all these years, we have done many workshops regarding personal training and also corrective exercise, which we believe, strongly we believe that it is the future for everyone that wants to work and everybody who wants to actually offer personal training. The definition of personal training, I believe it is the corrective exercise, because at some point, all of us, we are suffering from pain because of our everyday wrong movement. So here in Greece, we are telling this to all of our students, and we're trying to make them focused on corrective exercise and on helping people to feel, move, and live better. So we are waiting like 3 more minutes, and Ken, we will start with you. And then after this, we will move on with Wendy. So today it's a full day with NASM special people from NASM, master trainers from NASM, and for everyone that wants to ask something, please do this on the chat. Οπότε, παιδιά, όποιος θέλει να ρωτήσει κάτι, καλό θα ήταν, επειδή δεν θα έχουμε πάρα πολύ χρόνο να το κουβεντιάσουμε, να κουβεντιάσουμε γενικά, ετοιμάστε τις ερωτήσεις σας, γράψτε τες στο chat και εκεί πέρα λοιπόν στο τέλος θα έχουμε περίπου 10-15 λεπτά χρόνο για να συζητήσουμε με τον κάθε ένα κάποιες απορίες, εύχομαι στοχευμένες. Να θυμίσω λοιπόν ότι ο Ken Miller θα μας μιλήσει λίγο για τον περιοδισμό, θα μας μιλήσει λίγο για το μοντέλο OPT. Το OPT είναι το Optimum Performance Training της NASM, είναι το μοντέλο του περιοδισμού της NASM, το οποίο χωρίζει ουσιαστικά την προπόνηση σε 5 φάσεις. Στην φάση σταθεροποίηση, αντοχή στη δύναμη, υπερτροφία, μέγιστη δύναμη και ισχύ. Θα δούμε λοιπόν λίγο γιατί αυτό το μοντέλο πραγματικά δουλεύει, και θα ήθελα οι ερωτήσεις σας στο συγκεκριμένο θέμα να είναι πάνω σε αυτό το κομμάτι, δηλαδή ενδεχομένως στον περιοδισμό. Από εκεί και πέρα η Wendy θα μας μιλήσει μετά για το κομμάτι της διορθωτικής άσκησης, του corrective exercise, και θα δούμε ουσιαστικά πώς εξελίσσεται αυτό το μοντέλο του OPT, το οποίο ξεκινάμε να το δουλεύουμε στον οποιονδήποτε, και αυτό μετά εξελίσσεται και μπορεί να γίνει πιο συγκεκριμένο και πιο εξειδικευμένο σε άτομα τα οποία έχουν μυοσκελετικές δυσλειτουργίες και ανισορροπίες. Οπότε, σε ερωτήσεις σας παρακαλώ στο τέλος, είτε στα ελληνικά είτε στα αγγλικά, όπως θέλετε, στο chat, και θα προσπαθήσω να κάνω ένα monitoring και να μπορέσουμε να απαντήσουμε κάποιες από αυτές. So, Ken, I think we are ready. You can start. I don't want to lose any more time because I want to give the opportunity at the end to these wonderful people to ask some questions and maybe have a small conversation. So, Wendy, we will see you in an hour.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. And Giannis, if there's anything that I need to, if we're getting questions that are pertinent to the slide that I'm on, I don't mind pausing, but I know we have time set aside at the end for some question and answers. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you see that all right there, Giannis? All right, perfect. So I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on your behalf for the HNFC for this international webinar. So today, my name is Ken Miller, and well, not just today, but every day. Today, we will be discussing the OPT model and the training system that works. And as I go through the presentation, I will explain in different scenarios how the training model that we teach through the National Academy of Sports Medicine has worked in multiple environments for multiple goals and with people from different exercise, fitness, and performance backgrounds. So if you are familiar with the National Academy of Sports Medicine, what I have on the screen set up for you is what we call the OPT model, or the Optimum Performance Training Model. Now, to give you an understanding of what this model does and what it will enable you as a strength coach or personal trainer to apply when it comes to working with your clients and athletes, basically what we're discussing here is a multi-tiered training system. So what I mean by that is the fact that as a system, there is a, I don't want to say protocol, but there is a decision tree that you as a, again, personal trainer, strength coach, rehab therapist, anybody that's working with a body, this gives you a thought process. And this thought process allows you to take somebody who may have decades of exercise experience, performance experience, high level performance experience, or that person that maybe they are injured, maybe they are coming back into the field of exercise after maybe not working out or not having any kind of physical activity in their day-to-day, week-to-week. So they are obviously in that case deconditioned. So if you take that person and you figure out what their goals are, where they want to go, and on the front end, figure out what they're capable of doing, you can take somebody through this model. And of course, by a way of individualizing the acute variables, as I'll discuss in the presentation, you can take them from somebody who has little to no coordination, right, deconditioned, take them through these basic adaptations. As you'll see on the right side of this graphic here, you have stabilization, strength, and power. Now, to be a fully functioning human being, what we want to do is to make sure that as we take somebody through this model, we do it in a sequential, stratified, logical progression. And that's how we can get somebody to achieve their goals, is by making sure that we safely progress them through this training model. What I also want to show you, and this is something you're going to see over the next 4 slides either way, is that you'll see these phases 1 through 6 as they're delineated. You're going, again, through this graphic, you have this stair-step model. As stabilization is at the bottom, again, it is the widest and therefore the most important phase of the OPT model, because stabilization is something that everybody needs fundamentally. Without stabilization, nothing else, I don't want to say doesn't exist, but you're not going to achieve full strength or full capacity for power, for that matter, without establishing a firm base of stability. So when we're talking about phase 1, it is the first phase. And no matter what your goal is, again, if you're just trying to stay in shape, trying to stay fit, or compete at the highest levels of competition, everybody needs stability. Stability is a matter of body control. It is about postural endurance. It is about having the coordination you need to not just produce force, but also reduce force in deceleration in multiple planes of motion. So as we talk about stability, or the stability needs of the body, we are talking about the need to satisfy what it takes to move as a human being first. Now, Giannis, in his introduction, mentioned that corrective exercise is one of the fundamental modalities of training that everybody needs, and I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I want you to understand is that as this is the optimum performance training model, there is another phase of training which would actually precede phase one, and that's what Giannis referred to as corrective exercise. So before we would even get into stabilization, corrective exercise is there as a way of making sure that your individual compensation patterns are addressed. So once we address proper posture, making sure that your movement system is, as you will, is moving as best as it can, then we can progress into the training model, the OPT training model. So from that vantage point, there is a subset phase that would precede the OPT model, and that is what we would collectively call the corrective exercise programming. So if you are a practitioner of corrective exercise and have studied corrective exercise as it's taught through the National Academy of Sports Medicine, you would assess a new client, figure out their needs, observe them for compensation patterns, and then program design based on their individual needs. So that is great for somebody who, again, has not exercised in a while. They might have incurred muscle imbalances over the years, or they're in a post-rehabilitative situation to where maybe they're coming back from injuries, sprained an ankle, let's just say, or maybe have some low back issues. Once you've assessed that client, then you can take them through the point where they are moving better without pain, without discomfort, and then move them up through the optimum performance training model. And that's the model that you see here. But as Giannis mentioned earlier, corrective exercise would be a preceding model. But because that body of knowledge is so vast and so, I'm going to say intricate, but it is a large body of information that it in and of itself is its own workshop. So today I am going to focus on the OPT model and what it is that you as a performance coach or a personal trainer are most likely to take your clients through. All right, so moving forward from here, the NASM model, as it's known in its abbreviation, the OPT model, Optimum Performance Training, it's basically, as I mentioned before, a planned, systematic, and periodized training program. So as I take a healthy individual, I'm going to take them through these three levels: stabilization, strength, and power. Now, as a review, there are 6 unique phases when it comes to this form of training. And I just want to make clear that if you are somebody that goes through the certification course for the NASM certified personal trainer, that you will actually have exposure to the first 5 phases, phases 1 through 5. That phase 6 is there just to complete the model, because if you are a performance coach, you have athletes that have to produce a lot of force and have to maintain a high level of explosiveness and speed. That 6th phase I have added into this presentation just from the standpoint that I understand that there are strength coaches that are in this presentation. So just to give you a complete view of what somebody using the OPT model will use, not only are they going to use the phases 1 through 5, but if you are working with a high level athlete, that phase 6 might be a viable option for you. Actually, it will be a viable option for you when it comes to how you train your high-level athlete. But overall, in its simplest form, this graphic shows 3 adaptations and how it's broken up into 6 different phases. So how this works when it comes to periodization, how you get somebody from one phase to the next. Just to read off the slide for you for a second. Basically, we are looking to create the adaptations of stabilization, strength, and power. And when you are working with somebody long-term, and when I say long-term, that's whatever time frame you have to work with an individual to get them to their physical goal. So if I have a client who's just an ongoing client, I'm going to oscillate and go up and down the model based on their goals. So if it's somebody who has a general goal of, I just want to stay fit, well, I want to see that we go into all 3 adaptations. So maybe 1 month I'm working with stabilization. The next month after that, I will go into either phases 2 through 4 just to get some strength into their programming. And then in another month, so maybe the 3rd month, I will get into phase 5 and 6. So from that standpoint, I can plan out based on your goals, based on what your capacity for work is. I can show you and teach you what I'm going to do with you over the next 3 months before we even pick up 1 dumbbell, 1 barbell, or make 1 jump. But from that standpoint, it helps you as the fitness professional performance coach communicate your intentions with your client. So if you're still a student and you're still learning the different aspects of exercise science or performance training, just know that once you get that person in front of you, half of what you're doing as a coach or a personal trainer is communication. And when you have built and created that bridge of communication and you let them know what your full intentions are, and I'll tell you right now that me, myself, for what I do as a practitioner, as a strength coach of clients, before we do anything, I will show them what my intentions are. And this is what allows us to communicate and let them have a say, if they do have a say, on how their program is going to lay out. So if I tell my client that we're going to start off with stabilization, strength, and power, for one, this commits me to what I just told them, but for 2, it's an opportunity for them to ask questions on, okay, why are we working on stabilization? Why are we working on strength? Why are we working on power when all I want to do is lose fat? Or why do I have to do all of those 3 adaptations when my goal is to lift heavy weights, right? Shouldn't that just put me in phase 4 or phase 5? Well, now I can look at that as an opportunity to educate them about them and their bodies and what the next 3 months, next year is going to look like. So from that vantage point, understanding this structure does have an importance, not just for you as the personal trainer, but for your clients as somebody who's going to make the investment in you and your skills and your training sessions. So as I said, it's definitely planned and definitely has to be progressive, because a lot of times we can get stuck or get comfortable training a certain way. But to hold yourself accountable as a fitness professional, we want to see that we do vary the workouts, not just from the standpoint of, okay, I have dumbbells, I have barbells, I have a sandbag, I have a Viper Pro, I have a Cortex. No, it's about now using those modalities and changing the acute variables, which I'll be discussing in a little bit, and changing the acute variables for them to reach their goals. So now I can adjust the acute variables to have lower intensity, higher volume, let's say for stabilization, or maybe higher volume, higher intensity for one of the strength phases, or high intensity, low volume for power. So just to kind of sum it up really quick, that's a way of progressing, matter of progressing and regressing up and down the OPT model. So just and I'll go into a slide when it comes to, if you are a performance coach and you are working with a seasonal sport, let's just say right now here in the US, football is in season. So as I am working, if I were to be working with a football, so football American football, they are in season. So I might have spent the previous 3 months before the season started on power and maybe some max strength. But now that we're in season, it might be a matter of just maintaining conditioning, maintaining muscle balance. So I might be oscillating between stabilization, endurance, and maybe strength endurance just to maintain, proper movement patterns. And then as soon as the season is over, then that's where I would get into, as Giannis mentioned earlier, I can get into corrective exercise. I can now get into more thorough stabilization training just to get their body back into synchronization of the way the body is supposed to move without sport, and then up the intensity and progress through the model to incorporate more strength and power. Okay. But like I said before, the foundation for the model is stabilization. And as we progress from stabilization, now we have a better foundation to work through strength and power. So again, I look forward to your questions at the end. As this model goes, again, what we are looking at is a manipulation of the acute variables. And when I say acute variables, basically these are the factors that will be manipulated throughout your time training this client or the athlete. But overall, this is just a manipulation of volume, intensity, and rest. So just to go over these again, if you are an exerciser, or if you're somebody that works with somebody and guides somebody, you're telling them what to do. You're telling them how many, right, in repetitions, but also how many repetitions you are going to do, and that's your sets. Training intensity, that's how heavy or how light that you're going. And when I say how light, that could be body weight, but training intensity is basically how heavy you are going to lift that implement that's in front of you. Training volume is just the summation of what I just mentioned. It's just repetitions and sets. It's how much total work that's going to be executed for that session. Tempo, that's one of the acute variables. If I'm going to look at one of the acute variables that we tend to ignore or just goes underutilized as an asset for manipulating program is tempo. It's how fast you move. And as I'll discuss the different phases of training, tempo is one of the acute variables that does change from stabilization through strength and into power. Because if I'm working on postural endurance, if I'm working on coordination, I want somebody to move slow. I want somebody to be in control every second of that repetition, because we are focused on proper movement mechanics. And if you go too fast, then that attention to form and technique can go away really easily. So if we talk about repetition and tempo, just know that it is an acute variable that often goes underutilized, underrepresented in how we look at movement efficiency or coordination. Rest interval. So this is just how much time you're going to spend in between the sets, so that you can give your client enough time to recover or not recover, depending on what the client's goals are. And a lot of us on this next one, exercise selection, this is a matter of figuring out what goes into your workout. So for a lot of us, if you work out or you train in a specific facility, you have specific pieces of equipment that are in front of you. So that will, a lot of time will determine your exercise selection, just because of the equipment that you have. I can't have somebody do an exercise if I don't have that piece of equipment. So that will play a big factor, but just know that exercise selection as you progress through the model will be a factor in the adaptations between stabilization as well as power. Power, I need to move fast. I need to throw something. So unless you have a medicine ball, right, you are going to be very limited in how you perform power. But if I'm working on stability, where it is about body control, all I need is you and your body weight, and that's our modality. That we're going to be doing a lot of exercises based on you just moving your body in space. Exercise order. Again, I'm going to go over the different components of the workout as we would create it through using the OPT model, but order does matter, because if we look at the typical exercises that will be done in the gym, pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging, just to name the basic biomotor movements, how you put those movements together or how you prepare the body for those movements will basically shape how the workout will fashion itself. So in exercise order, we just want to know that there is a sequence of getting somebody to prepare their body for the actual training session. Training duration, again, that's what it is really. How long the workout lasts, and then how often you train is training frequency. So we want to look at training frequency as a way of just looking at, okay, how often during the week or the month or the year am I going to be stressing this client's body? So training frequency not only has an effect on what their schedule looks like, but when we look at this day and age and what is important for individuals, not is it just a matter of putting stress into the body through the workout, physical workouts themselves, but it is also about creating balance and giving the body a chance to unload and de-stress. So as I talk about the model, you're not just going up the model when it comes to stabilization up to power, but it's also about going from power and the heavier intensities of the later strength phases. But it's also about working down the model and getting somebody to revisit stabilization training, getting somebody to revisit corrective exercise if that is something that's in your wheelhouse, if that is something that's within your skill set. So corrective exercise, when applicable, it's definitely a great phase to get into if you are a skilled practitioner in that base of information. So again, I hope to answer some questions regarding acute variables if you have questions there. So for the sake of time, I'm going to briefly overview the different components of the OPT model workout template. So as it says here, when we look at the components, the warm-up being a big component, because unless I get the body prepared for movement well, I'm not going to move the body well under load. So when we look at the warm-up, this is where flexibility and a little bit of a warm-up movement pattern, like some kind of cardio that could be time on the treadmill, time on the elliptical, whatever it may be, just to get the client warmed up, right, in the right mindset to exercise. So when we discuss flexibility training, we are discussing getting somebody to be able to move through an optimized range of motion. So from that vantage point, warm up does include flexibility. Flexibility can be a component in and of itself, but overall, we are looking at, can somebody move well through the joints that they're going to be using, actually just moving well through the foot and ankle, the hips and the shoulders, just to give you three major joints that do need to be fully functioning if we're talking about total body movement. Now, activation. Now, as we discuss how we're fashioning your program, this is where we integrate core and balance. So core at its sum is, to look at it simplistically, is to basically, if we were to remove the arms and the legs, everything else that's left over, basically muscles connected to the spine, that's what we're considering core. So core isn't just what's in our midsection, from the ribs to the pelvis. Core is everything else. So if I'm talking about scapular movement, scapular control, or activating those muscles around the spine, especially in the upper thoracic region, that's what we're considering to be core, and not just about doing sit-ups and crunches. But another major area that we're looking at to activate core is your hips, your glutes. We need to make sure that our glutes are definitely fired up and turned on. So overall, core is there just to turn on what would, for a lot of people, be muscles that have been kind of underutilized, and we have to turn those muscles on or get them up regulated to commit to the exercises that are going to happen. And then balance, as we're talking there with balance exercises, that is a way of getting the body to recalibrate and coordinate. So when we talk about the gait cycle, if you are walking, about 85% of the gait cycle is going to be on one leg. And if you're running, you are 100% on one leg. So we want to make sure that just from a movement and a gait perspective, you have good balance, right? You have good balance. And it's not just about being able to stand on one leg, but we are, again, looking at it from a more gross vantage point. How well can you coordinate the foot and ankle, especially the foot, and making sure that we maintain proper foot position, because that's literally where the rubber meets the road. When your foot interacts with the ground, everything else above it has to respond. So as the foot and ankle have to move, they have to move well in coordination with the hips. And as the hips and the shoulders counter rotate to coordinate walking across the room, for example, there's that coordination there. So balance winds up being, again, something that we don't typically see in the exercise or the training environment, but it is a component that is very, very, very influential in creating proper total body movement pattern. Now, skill development, if you are a strength coach here in this workshop, in this presentation, skill development, this is where you want to, again, introduce plyometrics, get the body to upregulate its activation of the nervous system. And as it says here, SAQ for us means speed, agility, and quickness. And what we can also throw under skill development, if this is a session where I'm teaching you exercises where you have to learn a new skill, this is where that would go into. So once we've warmed up and prepared the body for movement, now it's a matter of getting the finer motor patterns to be honed in. So again, moving fast through plyometrics or reactive work, speed, agility, and quickness. And again, an opportunity to teach new exercise. So this is what we're talking about with skill development. And then the next component of the workout is resistance training. So in looking at what we mostly do, or what we mostly consider as exercise, this is where people will migrate. So if somebody has a gym membership or they work with, they work out at their homes, they might have some dumbbells. This is typically where people's minds go when it comes to training or working out. So this, if they go into a facility, they have a seated chest press, or they have a lat pull down, or they have a barbell, and this is where they're going to do their front squats, for example. The progression here, again, has been move the body, get the body to move well, get the body to move quickly with skill development, and then impose the stress through resistance training. And this is where, when I talk about the acute variables, this is really what I'm talking about, is how are we going to manipulate those acute variables to fashion the resistance training segment of their time with you in order to achieve the desired adaptations of stabilization, strength, and power. So resistance training, this is where they're, as I mentioned before, we're going to move low resistance, low intensity, high time under tension, okay, to work on coordination. Or is this a workout where I'm going to have you pick up heavier weights, higher volumes, moderate weight, right, and trying to achieve what we would consider to be a strength? Or am I having you pick up a lighter implement and then move it fast, right? Like taking a medicine ball and performing a chest pass or a ball slam, or am I doing a repeat squat jump in order to achieve the adaptation of power? So in resistance training, this is where a lot of us go to when we think about working out, but this is where those acute variables come into play regarding, okay, what do we have to manipulate to achieve the desired adaptation for that workout? And another component that a lot of people that I see in facilities or exercisers, and we talk about your workout program, the question I'll ask somebody is, so after all that, how did you get your body to cool down? How did you get your body to return back to homeostasis? How did you get the body to return back to normal? Because the last thing we want to do is get a heavy workout in and then just go straight into the car or on the train and then go home, right? We want the body to get back down to, again, a normal level, get the heart rate back down. But this is also, and this is what I want you to understand, is that in the cool down, and it says here light cardio, so that's just, again, get the body to calm down a little bit from the high intensity, the possible high intensity of that workout. And this is where we want to reestablish length tension relationships. We want to deload and de-stress the muscles from all the training and all the intensity that you've just imposed upon it. And this is where we would incorporate self-myofascial technique or some kind of static stretching. So static stretching, again, relative to what would get that client to move better leaving that facility. So that's basically the different components of a workout. So if you don't have a workout template or a format, this is one that we use through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. And when I look at what I just presented to you as far as the warm-up, each one of those components of the workout are laid out here on this form. So if you're a visual learner like me, this gives you something to look at. So your warm-up, your activation through core and balance, skill development, again, plyometrics and speed, agility, and quickness. Or if I'm teaching you a new exercise, resistance training, this is where the workout goes into play. How many sets, how many reps, how fast or slow are you going, and how much rest am I going to give you in between? Client's choice, that's just something we put in there so that the client can actually do the things that they want to do, right? So again, we co-create this workout together. If I'm being fully transparent and making sure that my client is just as much a part of program design as I am in giving the information, they should have a say in the fact that, hey, there's something that I want to do or love to do. Let's say if I want bigger shoulders or bigger biceps, I might add in there something that's relative to the client's personal wants when it comes to achieving those goals. And then, of course, as we just talked about, we have the cool down. So as we get into the acute variables, and I'm not going to be able to go over every list of acute variables for every phase, but as Giannis will tell you at the end of the seminar, there is an upcoming CPT course that's coming up in your local area, coming up November 3rd and 4th. So that's a great opportunity to have a more in-depth interaction when it comes to better understanding the OPT model and what it has to offer. So I'm only going to be able to give you a glimpse of what these acute variables look like when you manipulate them for adaptation. So I'm going to start off here with stabilization endurance. So this is phase one. So once I have assessed you, and you have a wonderful presenter in Wendy Batts who will be following my presentation with assessments. Now, there's only so much she's going to be able to go over with her amount of time, but she's going to give you some great insight on how assessments work and the information they can garner. So I'm bringing that up now because I want you to understand that before I do any of this, I will have performed a movement assessment. And within the OPT model, or the optimum performance training system, right? Client assessment is what helps guide you in figuring out what the client needs, especially for that initial session. So in stabilization endurance or phase one, what we are talking about, the goal being to enhance movement quality, improve coordination, improve postural endurance, just to name a few of the adaptations that you will acquire by manipulating these acute variables as they are listed. So in the warm-up, so it says there SMT, so just so you know, SMT stands for self-myofascial technique. And that is a matter of using a tool that you would place your body on to get the muscles to relax, get them to calm down, get them to down-regulate. In this phase, because stabilization is the adaptation, we do want to perform a static stretch. And this is just to get somebody to move more efficiently through improving flexibility or range of motion through a joint that may have otherwise been restricted in its ability to move through proper range of motion. Now, sets here in your warm-up are going to be 1 to 3. Again, lower volume, tempo, slow, or 30 seconds when it comes to how we stretch. And there's no rest because you're just stretching, right? Activation. So when we talk about core, now just to give you some examples of what a core exercise would look like in this phase, core would be something like a floor bridge, a plank, a prone isoab, prone cobra, just to name a few that would activate the glutes, the midsection, as well as the upper back. Again, low intensity, low volume, 1 to 3 sets. So again, there's a lot of teaching, a lot of talking from my vantage point. I want to make sure I have enough time to explain what I need to explain, ensure proper technique more than anything else. So I might only have time for 1 set. And again, 12 to 20 repetitions with slow, low volume. I'm not looking to give them a whole lot of work, but 12 to 20 reps, very slow. And again, depending on how you're fashioning your work, anywhere between 0 to 90 seconds. Skill development with plyometrics here, 5 to 8 reps, moving fast, something like a squat jump. And what's going to be really important here is that we're working on body control. When I'm talking about plyometrics in stabilization, the goal here is not how high or how far you're going to jump, but it's your ability to land. We are teaching them how to land, optimal movement or efficiency when it comes to when I jump, when I leave the earth and I jump and I land, how well can my body absorb all the forces that go through it from ankle through the knees, hips, and through the spine once I land? So from that vantage point, plyometrics, that is a focus. Tempo, 3 to 5 second hold, again, optimizing how they're interacting with the ground upon landing. And then, of course, speed, agility, and quickness, which in and of itself is another topic that we would teach through the National Academy of Sports Medicine through our sports performance program. Now, resistance training, again, we are going for stabilization endurance. We are trying to create somebody or trying to help somebody who can hold themselves properly, optimally, with all kinetic chain checkpoints being in line for an extended period of time. So when they're not with you, they have another 23 hours out of the day that they have to be able to hold themselves. So we have to create that environment where we're going to challenge endurance. So here, just to review the sets, 1 to 3 sets, again, depending on what their current level of endurance is, or how much time you have, or even how much education that you're incorporating into your training session. Reps, high volume, 12 to 20. But as you'll see here again, tempo being an underutilized acute variable, we are looking very, very slow, 4-2-1. So what that means is that we have a 4-second eccentric. So if I'm performing a push-up, as I lower myself to the ground, I am slowly for 4 seconds bringing my chest to the floor as I let my elbows bend. I'm going to hold for 2 seconds. That's the 2. And then I'm going to push myself up for 1 second, no hold, and that's what that 0 is. And then I'm going to bring myself down again. And I'm going to repeat that 12 to 20 times. And As I said before, as I fashion my workout, I'm going to go anywhere between 0 and 90 seconds for the rest, especially if I'm circuit training. That is something to look at. So here, training fundamentals, just to pick one of the motions, squat being it. This, as a NASM certified personal trainer, these are the things that you're going to learn as far as form and technique. So as we're bringing up here, feet straight, knees lined up over the feet, pelvis and spine are nice and neutral, allowing the foot and ankles to move in coordination with the spine. And of course, the head, neck, and shoulders also a part of that equation. So as you go through your personal training course, not only will you learn the acute variables that make the OPT model work, but technique, exercise execution is so important. So there's only so much that you're going to learn virtually from me. There is so much more that you're going to learn practical and hands-on through a live course. So that's where I wanted to point out here, form and technique is just as important as the exercises that you recommend. Multiplanar movement, again, just to look at some of the movement patterns. We want to be able to move in multiple directions. We need to move not just forward and backward, but left to right, as well as rotationally moving, because as life goes, life is 360 degrees. It's up, it's down, it's all around. So you need to be able to move different directions safely, all right, and efficiently. And this is what we learn when we challenge proprioception. Again, you optimize range of motion, flexibility, you have the ability to get there. You activate core and balance. You have your ability to now be stable wherever you're reaching. And then under resistance training, you're able to be someplace or be in a posture and position under strength and under load. And this is what we're looking at with the OPT model. But like I said, I'm just kind of scrolling through here, the different variables as they would be manipulated to accommodate the different adaptations. If you are a strength coach, I just wanted to go here. If you're planning out your calendar, you know when the season starts, you know when the off season is, then this gives you an opportunity to definitely strategize which phase is going to be executed and when. So I can communicate with the athletes, I can communicate with the sports coaches on what my plan is as a strength conditioning coach, how I complement the season and the athlete's needs with the programming. This is what this is about. And then if I know what the calendar looks like for the year, now I can strategize the month and the weeks and when I plan to execute the different phases of training. And basically that within the time of this workshop, hopefully I have definitely instilled in you all the importance of understanding the periodization between stabilization, strength, and power. Again, there's only so much we can do with such a vast and intricate system within the realm of 45 to 50 minutes. But overall, one of the points I did not make is that it's evidence-based model. It's been proven through science, supported through science, but overall, when I say this is a system that works, it's a system that works is because it works in different environments. Myself, I know I didn't give myself much of an introduction, but I've worked in the rehabilitative environment. I've worked in strength conditioning, and I worked with individual teams. But for the most part, I've been able to use the optimum performance training model in all of those different environments because of the decision tree and the logic that I can take from one environment to the next, because overall, the human body is the human body. And if I understand what you can do safely as you are today, and I understand your goals, I can fill in the gaps between now and whatever your timeline is. So overall, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to present, and hopefully I spelled that right. And I just want to share here some information. My social media, that's it, KJ Fit Lab. And if you have any questions moving forward, definitely go through Giannis. But as I mentioned before, there is an upcoming course that's coming up in, I hope I don't mess this up, Giannis, but Thessaloniki this November 4th and 5th. So hopefully I've inspired you enough to want to get more information when it comes to the optimum performance training model, but nothing replaces that face-to-face opportunity to be in front of a National Academy of Sports Medicine instructor to get that hands-on practical information, but also to reinforce what I just spent the last 40 or so minutes discussing about the model itself. So again, thank you everybody for your time, and I appreciate your attention to this workshop today.
Thank you very much, Ken. A lot of good information here. Let me say some things in Greek. Παιδιά, ελπίζω να καταλάβατε κάποια πράγματα. Ουσιαστικά μιλήσαμε για το κομμάτι της σταθεροποίησης, μιλήσαμε για τα 5 σκαλοπάτια που έχει το μοντέλο OPT. Πόσο σημαντικό είναι το κομμάτι της σταθεροποίησης και ουσιαστικά αυτό το οποίο πρέπει να κρατήσετε είναι ότι το tempo, καθώς και όλες οι υπόλοιποι παράμετροι που καθορίζουν ουσιαστικά την κάθε μία φάση έχουν να κάνουν με τις προσαρμογές στο μυϊκό κύτταρο. Πώς γίνεται αυτό? Γίνεται με το στρες το οποίο εμείς θα δώσουμε στο μυϊκό κύτταρο. Πώς δίνουμε αυτό το στρες? Με το να αλλάξουμε όλες αυτές τις παραμέτρους. Άρα διαφορετικά set, διαφορετικές επαναλήψεις σε διαφορετικό tempo, με διαφορετικό διάλειμμα και διαφορετικές ασκήσεις, όταν τις βάζουμε μια συγκεκριμένη σειρά, αλλάζουμε τις προσαρμογές γιατί αλλάζουμε το στρες. Άρα λοιπόν αυτό είναι πολύ σημαντικό, γιατί θα πρέπει, αν θέλουμε να ασχοληθούμε και να δουλεύουμε σε αυτό που λέμε personal training και εξατομικευμένη προπόνηση, θα πρέπει να γνωρίζουμε ακριβώς όταν αλλάζουμε κάποια πράγματα, κάποια συστατικά μέσα στο set μας, μέσα στην προπόνησή μας, πώς αλλάζουν, ξαναλέω, οι προσαρμογές και το στρες στο μυϊκό κύτταρο. Άρα λοιπόν όλα αυτά τα νούμερα τα οποία κάνουμε, 3 set, 12 επαναλήψεις, 4 set, 9 επαναλήψεις, 2, 5, 10, 15, 100 αυτού και βγαίνω, κάτι σημαίνει. Μην κάνετε λοιπόν στο περίπου πράγματα, αλλά γίνετε συγκεκριμένοι, σύμφωνα, ξαναλέω, με το στρες που θέλετε να δώσετε στο μυϊκό κύτταρο του ασκούμενού σας. Έχουμε λοιπόν κάποιος να κάνει κάποια ερώτηση ενδεχομένως. Αν θέλει κάποιος να ρωτήσει κάτι, να μας το γράψει στο chat για να ρωτήσουμε τον Gen. Αλλιώς θα συνεχίσουμε με τη Wendy και με το κομμάτι λίγο της διορθωτικής άσκησης που και τα πράγματα λίγο μπλέκονται, γίνονται λίγο έχουν πιο μεγάλο ενδιαφέρον. Λίγο περισσότερη εξήγηση για το Speed Agility Quickness. Σοφία, θα κάνεις την υπομονή, καθώς το δικό σου ταξίδι ξεκινάει σύντομα στη μάθηση, οπότε λοιπόν θα κάνεις υπομονή για το Speed Agility Quickness. Αν θέλετε να ρωτήσετε κάτι συγκεκριμένο, θα δώσω 1 λεπτό. So Ken, I was explained, I did a small summary with everything you said. And,
okay.
In Greek, and actually I told them how important it is to know how to change and work with all these acute variables that you described. And
yes.
If we want to be personal trainers and to offer personal training services, we need to address all these small changes and know what to expect when we do these changes. So
right.
I see some questions here, like could you please mention some examples of exercise of phase 2 strength endurance when we have to create programs outdoors with minimal equipment and not inside a gym? Good question.
All right. Yeah, perfect. Great question. And Wendy and I just taught a seminar this weekend, and an example of an exercise, and I'll give you a couple, but an example of a great exercise that you can do outdoors, minimal, even no equipment, is a push-up. So as I mentioned in the example of the acute variables, if you manipulate tempo, that can be your best friend. So if I take a push-up and I want to do phase 2, so a phase 2 strength endurance means we have a superset. We put 2 exercises together. You have a strength exercise that's immediately followed by a stabilization exercise. So in the environment of something that's heavy heavier resistance, followed by something that's now slower. I can do a full body push-up, and let's just say anywhere from 8 to 12 reps. So just for round numbers, I'm doing 10 full body push-ups. But then, but just to talk about tempo, I'm maybe 2 seconds down, 2 seconds up. So it's just constant motion, right? For the 10 repetitions, 2 seconds lowering, 2 seconds pushing up. Now I'm going to immediately follow that up by, say, doing the same push-up, but I'm changing the tempo. So now I'm going to lower myself for 4 seconds. I'm going to hold myself for 2 seconds, and then I'm going to push myself up, and I'm just going to repeat that. So slow on the descent, hold on the isometric, and then push for 1. So what you have there are 2 exercises. The first exercise takes 4 seconds, right? 2 seconds down, 2 seconds up. And then the second exercise, which now I've changed the tempo. So now that is a 7-second repetition. So if I'm doing 10 repetitions of strength, followed by 10 repetitions of stability, and that maybe I'm doing that on 1 foot. I have 1 foot on the ground, the other one's floating. And then so I have a 40-second set immediately followed by a 70-second set if I'm doing 10 repetitions each. So that's an example of something that you can do that is zero equipment, just your body, but I've manipulated tension. So another example might be, let's say I'm doing a squat, right? I'm doing an air squat, hands are behind my head, and I'm squatting up and down, 2 seconds down, 2 seconds up. But then I superset that with a single leg squat, the same 4-second down, hold at the bottom of that single leg squat, and then stand up for 1. And then I would do that for 1 leg and then do that with the other leg. So strength endurance is a great phase of training. I have a lot of my clients in that phase throughout the week, but hopefully I've given you some examples of how to just use body weight and manipulating tempo to accommodate being outside and without equipment. Great question. That's a really good question.
Another question that we get also a lot here in Greece is if the protocol of OPT can work for athletes of bodybuilding.
Yes. Okay. So how do you give me a little bit of context on bodybuilding?
So the thing is that there is the physical bodybuilding, and there is the bodybuilding that we use substances in order to create this muscle hypertrophy.
Yes.
So when you put something inside your body, then we forget everything about what we just learned or what we know. Okay, so if I take a substance, then I can do obviously more sets, more repetitions, I can the tempo, so it doesn't matter. So I think if you are doing physical bodybuilding, so let me say this question on another side. Let's approach on another side. So if someone is doing a physical bodybuilding without any substance, can he use the OPT model to achieve this muscle hypertrophy?
Yes, definitely. And just so you know, for those of you out there that are looking to improve your physique, maybe get a little bit bigger, and maybe go on stage, NASM does have a physique and bodybuilding course, right? So, and that's built around the OPT model, but for specifically the goal of improving your looks and aesthetics for physique and bodybuilding. So as the model goes, just to kind of review how that might look using the OPT model as I've explained it, you go through stability. Again, as I said, everybody goes through phase 1. Phase 2, as I just mentioned, now we're looking at endurance, strength endurance, and that prepares you for phase 3, which is muscular development. So we want to still go through all the phases, but for those that are looking to improve size, increase size, for the sake of aesthetics, muscular development is the phase where we are going to go high volume, moderate intensity, managed rest in order to improve muscle density. So if I had time, that would have been a phase that I would have spent more time on if I knew this question was floating around out there. But muscular development is the phase that is catered more towards those that are looking to physically be better. But of course, that's only one side of the coin, versus the other big side of the coin is nutrition. So proper nutrition that's going to give you the nutrients you need to put on the density you need to complement how you just stressed the body. But something that's out there, phase 3, and there is a physique and bodybuilding specialization course that we also have available through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. So great question.
So he asked if the phase 3 is enough for natural bodybuilding, if he can stop there or if he can move further.
Yeah, well, like I said, you still want to go through the other phases of maximum strength and power. Again, when we talk about strength endurance phase 2, people can put on muscular density in that phase because it is one of the strength phases, and in any of the strength phases, you stimulate the body enough or you give it enough challenge, you're going to give the muscle a reason to physically be stronger as well as bigger. So any one of those phases are going to help you do that. But as it is with any physique or bodybuilder that I've had a chance to work with, again, that's not my forte, but there is a definite benefit of improving performance in the weight room by going through all the phases. But you just, there's no getting around the nutrition side of things in order to have the body look the way it wants to look. But all 5 phases or 6 phases as I presented it are definitely in order. It's just how do you program that over the year to make it make sense for that person.
Hey, Ken, can I also add on to that? Yeah. I don't mean to butt into your session, but we've dealt with a lot of bodybuilders, and yes, the OPT model is enough. I saw that come through. But remember, your body starts to adapt every 4 to 6 weeks. And so you want to change the demand. And that's the beauty of the model because of the different phases based on those adaptations. So as a bodybuilder, and again, if you stay for my session about assessments, we're going to find where your deficiencies are. So it's very important on an asymmetrical or asymmetry that we, on a corrective exercise standpoint, make sure that we have the right muscles firing at the right time. So aesthetically, you're going to look better. You're going to be able to lift more as you progress into strength. And then at that point, you're going to lift heavy to get all the muscles and recruitment and the muscle fibers that you need to lift that load. So it's a combination, as Ken said, with diet, making sure that you've got the asymmetry that you need. So therefore, you're going to look good on stage, especially if you're a poser just to one side. And then, of course, looking at the nutrition side as well. But you want to change up your workouts every 4 to 6 weeks. So if you are stuck in phase 3, go to phase 4, lift 1 to 5 reps as hard as you can, and then go back down to 3 one day and undulate your program. So therefore, you're starting to really challenge your body in multiple ways throughout the week. So therefore, those gains don't stop.
Perfect. Thank you, Wendy. So last question. We have a question that it's go like this. So we have the 3 big phases like stabilization, strength, and power. Can you give us an example how you can work with these different phases when we design a training program for an athlete? Let's say basketball, for example. So you have an athlete for a year. So you want to make a program. How can you change these phases?
Great question, especially if somebody's gone through the model. And I say it's a great question because it's it's a very practical question, not just for somebody who works with basketball players where there's an off season and an in season. So just to kind of give a little set the stage here, in the off season, hopefully you will have worked on stabilization, strength, and power. So once you've achieved those adaptations of stabilization, strength, and power, when you are in the competitive session or competitive season, your job as a strength coach is try to maintain stability, strength, and power the best you can. So if you're in season, you're going to have to balance the volume and the intensity of practice, the volume and intensity of competition. So from a conditioning side, I want to do what I can to make sure that they lose as little stability as possible. Again, that's stabilization is hard to maintain in season because you're in basketball, you're jumping, starting, stopping, sprinting. So you're using a lot of your type 2 muscle fibers, your power and explosive muscle fibers. So those muscles get a lot. And the phrase we use here is, if you don't use it, you lose it. So if I'm not actively working on maintaining stabilization, either through phase 1, stabilization endurance, or phase 2, strength endurance, my level of stability is going to go down. So as I go through the season, I want to interject either phase 1 or phase 2 once a week at least, but throughout the season, and maintaining, as we discussed earlier, muscular development, max strength, just to maintain the strength side of things, power, just to make sure that our form and technique are there. So over time, I do want to oscillate between the adaptations of stability, strength, and power. And this is where that planning comes into play. Because if I know your competition schedule, I know when you're practicing, I know when you're going to have time for conditioning, that's when I'm going to interject those different phases of the OPT model, what makes sense. Because as we oscillate through the model, what we are talking about is what we call on our end an undulating program. So we just undulate up and down the model in season to maintain what we can of all 3 of those adaptations. But again, competition is competition. You don't know what's going to happen, but if you do the best you can to implement it, you're doing what you can from a conditioning standpoint to make that athlete as resilient as possible through the season. So nothing, you know, is more discouraging than somebody who does get hurt because you haven't completely integrated the, you know, what the body needs by way of stability, strength, as well as power. We always tend to get more biased towards strength and power with a little attention towards stability. But again, off season, gain all 3 adaptations. In season, oscillate between the 3 and do the best you can to keep what you have.
Okay, one last question, please, really fast.
One last one, okay.
Last one. So we have a question from Nicholas who is asking, we may note on our calendars when one phase should begin or end, but when can we be sure that our athlete is ready to move from one phase to the next one? So the question is like, how can we know when to change the phases? And the other question from the same guy is that if there is any optimal ratio for specialized exercise that mimic the movement pattern of the sport that this athlete is doing, and if we need to have a specific balance regarding power and strength.
Okay, what was the good questions, but what was the first one again, Giannis?
The first one is how can we know when to change, when to shift?
Okay. When to change. So it takes the body about 4 to 6 weeks to acquire an adaptation. So if I train you in phase 2 for about 4 weeks, I know that consistent training for those 4 weeks, manipulating the acute variables of strength and stability, 8 to 12 reps, both paired exercises. I know that you're going to be stronger. I know that you're going to stay in tune with your ability to stabilize. So, and it takes about 4 weeks is what 4 to 6 weeks is what the research shows as far as how long it takes to acquire those adaptations. So once we've acquired those adaptations, then it's time to move forward. So what we'll tell trainers as we teach them through our courses is that reassessment should happen every 4 weeks, right? So if I were to pick a date on the calendar, maybe it's the first of the month is when I'll reassess. One, that helps me fine tune or update their self-care program as far as, okay, what do they need to work on as far as the range of motion? What core exercises do they need to be integrated? But it's also a chance to, and if again, we're talking about strength and performance, to perform or do different assessments, as Wendy will talk about with, strength tests like a bench press or a squat, or performance tests like a Shark Skills or a Davies test, on top of range of motion assessments, like with the overhead squat. And what was that second question again, Giannis? Sorry.
Yes. So the second question is if there is any specific ratio regarding power and strength exercise and exercise that they are mimic a specific movement of this athlete.
Okay, so that's a good question. If you're here's the thing, conditioning is not sport and sport is not conditioning. So if I have somebody who's playing baseball or cricket where they have to swing a bat, the one thing I don't want to do with my athlete is to now do resistance training that mimics that swing pattern for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to risk creating an overuse injury. So if they swing right to left, right, and all the muscles that go into rotating from my right to my left, I stand a high opportunity to just muscle as it is about the joints that have to encounter that repeated stress. Now, if it's a matter of training, now instead of a bat, now a lot of trainers might use a cable or a dumbbell or some kind of weighted implement, which will now exponentially increase the amount of stress that is going through the joints. So that's number one. But the other part of it is that if you're now under load, you're creating a different motor sequence. There's a different motor unit recruitment. You could be using the same muscles, but now how you're using the muscles and how you're teaching the muscles to move, I'm going to move slower with weight, right? Now, if I have to swing a bat, do I want to move slow or do I want to move fast? Well, I want to move fast, obviously. So I don't want to ruin or mess up the motor pattern by mimicking a certain movement. So the other part of that answer is the fact that I want to do things that help the person or that help the athlete move better as a human being first. So it's health first, performance second. So I want to spend time getting them to, reverse or unwind what you spend so much time winding up, right? So if in the case of batting, I'm rotating right to left, well, what about those muscles that rotate me left to right? Okay, I want to spend time doing basically the reverse in creating more of a balanced movement pattern, especially when it comes to sports, throwing sports, swinging sports, things that create just it's a single pattern that's just repeated over and over and over again. So the ratio, I would say, I'm not a big fan of mimic. I know there's coaches out there that mimic certain sports, and yes, you do have to strengthen joints to encounter resistance and speed in certain positions, but mimicking is not something that I would encourage just for the sake of maintaining muscle balance and preventing overuse injuries. So big question, definitely something that you can expand on in a full workshop. But as far as the strength conditioning side of sports performance, but overall, those are my two things. I wanted to get them to move better as a human being, and two, avoid overuse patterns.
Perfect. Ken, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Great question.
Wendy, I'm sorry that we have take your time.
Oh, that's fine. No, I'm glad to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Giannis, if you're fine with that.
Of course.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Putting it on presentation mode. There we go. Okay. Well, first of all, these were excellent questions that came through on Ken's side, where I'm hoping that some of these questions I might be able to answer through the assessment process, because in all reality, the assessments are the most important thing that you can do with your clients, your athletes, your friends, your family, because if you're not assessing, you're guessing. You have no idea really what they need. And if they're coming in with a specific injury or something's causing discomfort, or if you're working with professional athletes and you've noticed that they've hit this, they're not running any faster, they're not lifting anymore, and they're not moving at a faster speed, then there's probably something along the lines that you could be doing differently with these people. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose of the assessments. I want to identify different assessments that we use for different goals. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the techniques and execution of these assessments. And then I want to talk about what you do with the results, because everyone can assess all day, but if you don't know how to take those results and then program correctly, then really what are you doing? So, I mean, yes, you're gathering information, but we want to make it applicable for our programming to ensure that we're providing the best service to our athletes and or our clients. So first and foremost, we're going to talk a lot about optimal movement patterns. If we are lacking mobility at a joint, then we don't have flexibility where we need it. And that's then going to, with the decreased range of motion at a joint, is going to cause compensations throughout the kinetic chain. And then it's going to lead to a decrease of proper movement patterns and or performance long-term. Now, I work mainly with professional athletes. So I work a lot with NBA. That's usually now more of my sport, but I've worked in every single sport that's out there and worked with people at the highest level, utilizing only the NASM system. And the reason why I teach for them is because I believe in it and I've seen it work. But if we don't look at someone's assessment and how they're moving, then we can't see where there's a restriction at a joint or where there's an imbalance throughout the body. And oftentimes, if we can identify this information, then we're going to be able to design programs based on what we're seeing. And then we're able to reassess to make sure that we are doing the right things each and every time they come in and are working with us. So that's also what's very important. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for optimal movement patterns throughout the entire kinetic chain, starting from the ankle and working all the way up through the head. So why is this important? Well, I'm going to challenge you guys to do this because I am a very, very visual person, very visual. So ideally, we're looking for optimal length tension relationships throughout our joints, like on our joints. And if we have a joint at the top and a joint at the bottom, we want to have the proper length on one side of the joint as well as the other. However, as we know with compensation patterns, one muscle starts to become overactive over time if we're not implementing the right self-care program or right program, especially on the flexibility side, that this becomes the new norm. So we don't have optimal neuromuscular efficiency. So if I have let's say a runner, because I saw someone ask about a runner, and I have them running, or they're running a ton of mileage, but yet they're not then foam rolling anything, they're not statically stretching muscles, and they're not activating the other side, then over time, their normal stance becomes their feet turning out, sometimes an anterior pelvic tilt because of overactivity in the hip flexors. And as they stand and they start running, and this isn't addressed, then that becomes something that the brain finds to be the normal pattern. And that's how we see these compensation patterns in people of all sports and or all, if someone sits a lot or they're driving a lot, those are just common compensations. So if we know that we are most powerful and we are less likely for injury or discomfort at joints if we have optimal alignment, we also know too that we are more powerful this way. So if I challenge you guys now to line up your wrist and your elbow, so I don't know if you guys can see this, but if you line up your wrist and your elbow and you make a fist and you make it really hard, you're going to see that you're the strongest when there's both sides of the joint are lined up equally and our joints are optimally stacked. That's how the body and the system thinks as well. However, if we have an overactive muscle on one side, and I told you now to go into wrist flexion and make that same fist, we have overactivity on one side of the joint and the other side is lengthened. If we make that same fist, we're not as powerful as we are as when we were lined up correctly. Well, the same as if you go into extension, you're going to see that you're even weaker. So what we do know is if you're overactive on one side of the joint, it's still weak. And if you go to the other side in the underactivity, it is even more weak. So we are optimally more powerful, and we're going to be able to lift more load, and we're becoming more stable, which will then also lead to more power production, is if our body is in as optimal position, meaning our joints are properly lined up throughout our entire kinetic chain. And so that's one of the things we want to identify is where are the muscle imbalances, and then what can we do to address those? So with NASM, we start with everyone in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. And what those 5 kinetic chain checkpoints are is we have people stand up with their shoes off. I know there's an example with shoes on in this little cartoon character. However, shoes are off. And the reason we take the shoes off is because oftentimes our shoes will offer support in the arch. We want to see how our body reacts with gravity just on the floor. And then we're going to have the individual stand, the feet are pointed straight ahead in line with their second and third toe. Their knee is in line with their second and third toe. The kneecap is also then aligned with the ASIS bones, so your hip bones. We're going to then make sure that our shoulders are in neutral and our head are in neutral. That is what we're looking for when we have our clients work out. We have people do any kind of movement throughout the day, because at that point, if we start them in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, we can see where are deviations into how they normally stand and what's comfortable and where optimally they should be. And so when we start throughout all of these assessments that I'm getting ready to cover, I want you guys to understand that we do teach someone how to stand in this position, because we know based on biomechanics and based on anatomy that that's where you're structurally going to be the most powerful when you're doing something, and also will decrease the stress to the joint. So here's an example that you would find out if you've gone through our corrective exercise specialization, but it's an example that even through our CPT that we provide people. We want to know as much information and assessments that we can get verbally, which is subjective information from your client. We want to see how they normally stand, looking just at them statically. And then I'm going to show you some of what we call transitional movement assessments, which is what happens when we start adding movement. And then also what happens when we take away the base of support, meaning we look at their balance. And then we also want to see too, on a performance, again, if we have a lot of performance coaches here, this is something that obviously I am near and dear to because of my clientele. I may have to do some loaded assessments, some dynamic assessments, but then in all reality too, we talk a lot about mobility assessments because I want to look at the joint. And with all of this information combined, I'm getting a very, very good screenshot. This is the blueprint of how I should design my program to make sure I'm emphasizing what's in the need of my athlete or client, and making sure too that I'm providing the best care to get the best movement out of my client throughout everything that they're doing. But if I keep trying to program an exercise where they're lacking range of motion or flexibility, then I'm not helping achieve anything. So I want to address these compensations. However, I need to identify them first. So the overhead squat assessment. Now, this is one of NASM's easiest one. This is the one that we teach all of our clients first because it is super simple to do. And it requires nothing other than the individual and the floor. So you don't need any outside equipment. We don't have to have anything other than our eyeballs and a way to teach our client how to move this way. So it is the most common, and we gather a ton of information. But basically, we will set these individuals up in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. So you can see this individual on the image that I provided. He is set up into those 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. So again, feet, knees, and hips are lined up. And then you're going to have the individual raise their hands overhead, trying to minimize any bend at the elbow. Just by getting them in this position and putting there, I may be able to start seeing compensations right away. But what we're looking for is what happens when we start adding movement, what's happening to their torso, and do they have neuromuscular control while they're doing just a basic squat in this position. So we tell everyone just to squat like they're sitting in a chair. We don't ask them to go to past parallel or at least to parallel. I want to see how low can they go at a comfortable level, at least to a chair height. And then I have them perform 5 from an anterior view, so looking straight ahead, 5 from a lateral view, and then I may look at them from the back side as well, because all of this is going to give me information. So if I start them in these 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, and then I start to see their feet turn out, or their knees cave in, or their hands fall forward, this is giving me information that I write down, and we all have check sheets through NASM.org. We have check sheets for this. Did you see this? Check, check. Right side, left side, both sides. And once we get all of this information, we can then further if we want to add other assessments or not. So just quickly, because I know we have short on time, these are some of the things we're looking for. We're trying to see from those 5 kinetic chain checkpoints where deviations occur. And even if they're slight, we note them, because as someone gets tired, those compensation patterns will get worse. This is an example of knees in. And again, what we're looking for are, do the kneecaps cave in past the first great toe or the big toe? And if so, is it worse on one side than the other? So these are extremes, but I'm also looking at what happens at the arch of the foot. Did the arch remain up, or did I start to see pronation? Anything that I've noticed, I start to mark down. Now, ideally, when we're looking at a client or an athlete from the lateral view, I want parallel lines from the low back and the torso. And the reason that we have our athletes squat, move, or do anything, so if they're lunging, they're squatting, they're doing single leg, anything with the squat, we're looking for those parallel lines, because we know based on anatomy and biomechanics that if we have good parallel lines from the torso and the back, the torso and the shin, if we see those lines making parallel where they're never going to intersect, then we have equal weight distribution between the ankles, the knees, and the hips. If you start to see someone falling forward, meaning that they have an excessive forward lean, even if it's slight, then that lets me as a personal trainer or a practitioner or a coach know that this individual is lacking at least 20 degrees of dorsiflexion in the ankle usually. And so they want to show you how low they can go, but they don't have the ability to shift their lower leg forward to get their knee over their second and third toe. So on a programming side, that gives me some really good information. Plus, if I'm working with a professional athlete and I know that they don't have good range of motion here, or that they're lacking core stabilization, and that's what's causing this, then I definitely don't want to put a bar on their back and then tell them to squat, because then I'm using no longer the quad and the glute, which are the primary muscles. I'm using now my lower back, which can actually increase discomfort, cause more pain, and could be something that long-term, especially with a pro athlete as they're jumping and bounding, causing more chances of injury. Same thing with the low back arch. Those that sit a lot, those that are runners, those that have really tight hip flexors, or if they have tight lats, if we see a low back arch, it lets us know, hey, there's a dysfunction here. And then we will be able to identify what muscles are causing that compensation and which ones are allowing those compensations. And again, this is an extreme arms falling forward, but ideally we're looking for that athlete to be able to keep their arms in line with their ear as long as their head's in a neutral position. And with that information, that might be enough. However, again, if you're working with more professional athletes, or if you really need to gain more information, we would say, as long as when they're on 2 legs and they did their overhead squat, as long as they didn't have a lot of knee coming inward or knee valgus, and it was safe to get more information, I might then have my client or athlete go into a more advanced assessment to see what's happening at the lower body. So if your client goes into the overhead squat and you notice that their knees kind of bowed out, that's not very common, even though we might think it is. So to get a little more information, I might take away their base of support and have them again get into the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, and then just lift up one foot that you can see right here. So it doesn't go in a backward position. I'm not doing a pistol squat. This leg remains right beside the ankle of the foot that's on the floor. And then I would have them again perform 5 single leg squats, only going to chair height. And I'm seeing what's happening at the foot and ankle complex and at the knee. And then do I also start to see some inward rotation or a hip hike that I want to note? Because oftentimes on 2 legs, if the knees go out, when you take away their base of support, their knee will actually cave inward, because now you've taken away that base of support, and this is where the weakness is happening. And so if you see a difference between phase or your overhead squat, and then you notice like maybe now the knees are coming inward in the single leg squat, you're going to take those lower body results for the single leg squat and use those over what you got over the double leg squat. Again, does this require any other material to have? And the answer is no. And again, why I love these, because I don't need anything except for my eyes to see what the client is doing. This is again more advanced. And if your client doesn't, if you're not sure if they can do a single leg, then you can put them in what we call more of a split squat stance, which is basically like a lunge. And then you can have them just do a stationary lunge. So you can see what's happening at the front foot, meaning does the knee cave inward, or even the back leg, does the back foot start to shift out, or does the knee cave inward? So we're just gathering information, and this can be done very, very quickly, something that doesn't take a lot of time, however, provides you with a wealth of information. Now, mobility assessments. Giannis, I know you are a huge advocate for corrective exercise, and I'm telling you, with all of my professional athletes, corrective exercise is one of the, if not the most important thing that I do with them. And so what I end up doing after I've done my overhead squat, maybe my single leg squat, is I will do a few mobility assessments. If you do not have your corrective exercise specialization, I absolutely love this course, because again, you don't need anything, but the information, especially during mobility assessments, that you can gather is unbelievable. Because if I noticed that my athlete's feet turned out, so externally rotated during the overhead squat, and I wanted to gather more information, I could have my client go up to a wall, put both feet forward, and then take one little step backwards, and making sure that the front foot, the distance is about 2 inches from the wall to the big toe. And then I would have them just slightly see if they could have their knee touch the wall without compensation. That's simple. Can you have your knee touch the wall and not compensate? I'm just looking at it, yes or no. If the answer is no, so they are feet turned out during movement, and now I know that their knee can't touch the wall, and they quote failed that movement assessment, then I know the reason is because of a joint restriction. So on a programming side, I need to spend more time foam rolling the lateral gastroc as well as stretching that, and then working on the medial side. However, if their feet turned out, but their knee could touch, then it's more of a weakness. It's more of the medial gastroc or the medial side that is allowing that compensation to occur, because it's not strong enough to withstand or hold that joint into correct positioning. So as a practitioner or a personal trainer or someone that's working with clients or athletes, this information can let me know specifically what's causing or allowing these compensations to occur, whether it's overactivity or the weakness of that joint. And of course, every one of the joints have different ways of looking at mobility assessments, and they're all that quick. So if somebody's arms fall forward, I would lay them flat on their back. I would see if they could just lift one hand over their head while they're laying on their back without bending or compensation. And that allows me again to see what's happening at the lat. Was there a low back arch, or was there compensation where their arm could not reach the floor without bending? So again, all of this just kind of takes your transitional movement assessments and now either tells you what direction to go. And again, these are just optional things, but they take no time to do. It's not causing stress. It's appropriate for every fitness level. But again, as somebody that uses this has been one of the things that has made me super successful, because I know exactly where to pinpoint my programming. Now, again, I told you that I work mainly with professional athletes. Loaded and dynamic assessments, I have to provide information to a lot of the strength coaches, as well as some of their coaches, depending on the sport that I'm working with specifically. And so they want to know what someone's bench is and so what someone's squat is, and they want to know that type of information. I have to then provide that. So of course, when we're looking at the differences here, these are some examples that we're going to also cover, but these are optional. Not everybody needs to know this information, but also too, when you're working with this type of clientele, you're going to think about some of the dynamic assessments, because that's also going to give you an indication of how they split, cut, run, how they move in all three planes of motion. And it's going to allow you to reassess them to ensure that their movement quality and pattern is better, and that also their time is going in the direction that it needs to. So they're becoming faster and more explosive out of the blocks or off the line, depending on who they are, and that your programming is going to help them achieve those specific goals. Here are some different dynamic assessments that we use a lot with NASM and our players. This is more of a dynamic assessment because, again, now we're adding some movement, but this is the LESS test. Now, every one of these assessments that we have videos to show you how to do these. We obviously have ways of giving you demonstrations and how to set this up appropriately. But for example, you're going to have an individual stand on a box. They're going to have videos up, or you may be just looking at them real time. You're going to have them then jump down, and you're going to see what's happening at their knees. Did they cave in? And again, why is this important? Well, if you're playing basketball, do you think this would be important? And the answer would be yes. Why? You're having to jump, you're having to move, you have to box out, you have to be able to jump in different positions with a lot of forces that you don't know are coming at you, and still be very accurate in your movement. So we want to decrease the chances of injury for that reason. So this is one of the assessments that you could do. This assessment is one of my favorites, especially when you're working with individuals that need to have really good upper extremity movement. So again, in basketball, when you're playing tennis, baseball, this was actually something that was looked at, and the reason we came up with it was a lot because of lacrosse. But when you're thinking about this, it again takes nothing other than two little pieces of tape, and you put these about 36 inches apart. You put them into the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints again, but now they're in a prone or face down position with their arms pointed forward, and you're going to have them touch the opposite hand as fast as they possibly can for 20 seconds. And again, as a personal trainer or as a fitness professional looking at my athlete, I'm seeing what's happening at their shoulder complex. Did they have winging? Did their chin jet forward? Did they have a low back arch? Was their body turning versus moving as one unit? And then also too, how quick can they move with gravity being against them? So again, this is something that I have found to be very beneficial, because I know that if my client or athlete is winging, then I have some instability and I am lacking the scapulothoracic rhythm that I need throughout my shoulder complex. So then again, too, I know that I could have a lot of stress in that one particular joint that could easily be worked upon if I had this information. And I want to make sure, because they need that for their sport, that I'm gathering that information. So therefore I can ensure myself during a reassessment that I've got good information of where I'm starting versus where they are when I reassess them the second time. Again, here's some of the other performance assessments. We do push-up tests, bench press, squat, vertical jump, long jump. But one of the ones I'm going to actually show you is the shark skill test. And this is also something that is more something that NASM really emphasizes. This is something that they actually came up with, because this one test alone allows me to see my client, especially on one leg, at a faster pace and how they move in all three planes of motion. So if I was looking at the overhead squat and I noticed that they didn't have a lot of knees coming inward, and it was something that then I performed maybe a single leg squat, and I didn't see where it was going to cause a lot of stress or it wasn't safe. If I'm working with a professional athlete, I will have them perform this test. Why? Because I get a lot of really good information here. What do you need? You need tape. You need something like painter's tape that you put on the floor. It's a 36 by 36 box where you're breaking it up into 9 small 3x3s. And then they're going to stand in the middle box with their hands on the hips. So this image, she doesn't have her hands on her hips, but then she goes, if she's on her right foot, she'll go from her upper left back to the middle, then the center square back to the middle, then the upper right back to the middle. And then she's going to continue that pattern. And we're actually doing this for time. If the hands come off the hip, the other foot touches down, they go into the wrong square, or they don't even come back to the right square. All of those are what we call a foot fault, or a fault in the patterning and or with their hands coming off. And we add time to that. But as someone that's really, especially working with some pro athletes, it allows me to see, does the knee cave inward? Is their torso able to withstand that? How do they move behind them without seeing something? So they're moving in the transverse plane without really looking at it because they're facing forward the whole time. And then the biggest thing is, what's the difference between their right foot and their left foot? Where's the asymmetries and how off are they? And so again, it's a really good assessment that's super quick to do, that allows me to get even more information on their ability to move without a base of support. So just single leg. And then how, on a postural standpoint, how do they move under quickness, stress, and then having to think through the patterning. Again, this is another one that we often do. It's called the lower extremity functional test, or the left test, for athletes that have to, like if you have a football player or soccer player, actually anyone that has to, basketball player, where you have to actually cut and move in different positions in a very fast speed, even tennis players. This is some information that I want to know. So I have them, I set the cones into a certain position. And then at that point, you can see about 10 yards. They're going to sprint as fast as they can forward. Then they backpedal. And the backpedal, it's very interesting because some of the best athletes, they seem very awkward going backwards. Then I have them side shuffle to each cone. They karaoke down and back again to both sides. And then I have them finish sprinting forward. And again, I'm taking that for time. I want to see how their body moves in different ways and in different planes of motion, and how quickly they can actually stop, unload, and then explode again in a different direction, maybe doing a different pattern. So it's allowing me to identify this way as well. So once you've done whatever assessments you feel is appropriate for your athlete or client, what do you do with this information? And I get that all the time. Well, great. I have all this stuff. I have the times. I have what their feet went out and their knees caved in. I don't know what to do with it. Well, that's again why I love NASM, is because we took the guesswork out. We provide what we call a solutions table for you. And it will say, and this is an example, if your feet turn out, these are the muscles that are overactive and these are the muscles that are underactive. And this is basically during the overhead squat. So even if that's the only thing you do, or the only assessment, again, that you use, we've given you the answers, because with that information, the muscles that are overactive that caused that compensation, it's pulling that joint out of alignment, we're going to tell you to foam roll or to use some kind of muscle, like percussion therapy, something to down regulate the overactivity of that. You're going to do that first, and then follow it up with static stretching. That's going to help realign that joint. But remember, and again, we talk a lot about this in the corrective exercise. If you just work on one side of the joint, but don't address the opposing side, then it's going to go right back over time. So what we want to emphasize is getting good length on the overactive side and then strengthening the side that was weak that allowed that compensation to occur. So we want to think on a corrective exercise standpoint, what muscles should you activate to help restore that joint alignment long term? And those are the ones that we want to specifically strengthen. And so we've told you what muscles to foam roll and stretch. We told you what muscles to strengthen, and that's going to help correct the alignment and easily be able to move within the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. Because remember, you're only as strong as you are stable, and you're only as powerful as you are strong. And so that's one of the reasons why we were huge advocates for the OPT model, is because you spend time in corrective exercise fixing the dysfunction first, working on activation of the right muscles, firing at the right time and the right plane of motion to ensure we have a strong foundation first. So therefore, when I start adding load to it, that I know that my joints and my stabilizers and my prime movers are all working the way that they're intended to work. So therefore, I can add more load and then hit whatever goal it is that I want. So when I do want to get to power, especially if they want to get to power, which everyone should have some sort of power, because we want to train for the speed of life, not just high-end athletes, but even, you know, our grandmothers need to move faster at times to cross the road. So power is important. We may have to manipulate some of the acute variables. However, we want to train for different goals with all populations. So every single athlete can use this. Every single individual can use this. It's just maybe 3 and 4. And that's why when you go through our material, we'll say they're optional, because some people don't want to gain size and some people don't need to know their 1 rep max. However, when they get to phase 5, there is the 1 to 5 reps, meaning that you are lifting a lot of load. So you may want to actually start to bring that into your programming first, and then go into phase 5. However, this is the beauty of personal training, is it's about an art, the art of training. Give the client what they want, but give them what they need. And meaning that give them what they need based on their assessment. However, give them what they want by achieving the goal that they find necessary. So again, with the model, we give you a step-by-step blueprint of exactly how to do the assessments to get that information. And then we show you utilizing, as Ken went through, the acute variables. Following this model will help someone safely get to their goals. But it also kind of gives you a layout of how long it's going to take for them to successfully do that based on movement patterning and biomechanics. So the big key takeaways that I had for this, and again, the assessments are like the one thing that I love the most, because it gives me all the answers. It tells me, listen, my client needs help here. And in order for me to get them to that goal, I need to find out what's not working appropriately, why they might have discomfort, and then what I can do to help them live their best life and achieve the fitness journey that they came to me to achieve. So again, I'm looking at NASM to help me with my assessments. So therefore, when I look at the model that they've already listed out, I just plug and play those exercises that I think will be best for my client based on what I've seen and how they move. So again, I'm diving deeper on what's allowing certain compensations to occur, especially during those mobility assessments. And then also too, was it joint or was it weakness? So I'm able to take it that step further, which means my programming and my client can actually achieve goals quicker because I'm not guessing. But we always set everyone up in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. And we do that again, because we know structurally that's the safest way for our body to move and exert the less amount of force until I need to. And then I'm going to be in the safest position to lift that load or move that fast. If you're doing these assessments, you're going to note every single thing you see. Again, it doesn't have to be just in your face. The arms came down by their belly button. It was, you know what, it moved just a little bit on one side and maybe it didn't move on the other. So oftentimes people have some asymmetries. And if you see something on the left, you note it. If you didn't see it on the right, don't just assume that you missed it. And one of the easiest ways, if you're going to dive deep into the NASM content, is get permission to use video, and maybe video your client while you're doing some of these assessments. And therefore, when you reassess every 4 to 6 weeks, you have something to compare it to, because that's when the aha moment happens. And then you're like, hey, look, I'm helping you achieve your goal, and look how much better you're moving. And so again, just something that you have to get permission to do that, or I ask to video it on their phone so they go home with it, even though I'm also taking note personally. So I have notes on how they moved as well. If you're not sure, you're still learning about anatomy, we don't expect you to know everything, but that's why we provide you with that solutions table. So therefore, again, we take the guesswork out. You just have to identify it. And then again, reassess, reassess, reassess. Put it in your calendar, make a note of it, or let your clients know at the beginning every month or middle of every month or whatever. We're just going to see how you're moving. And if you're not seeing the results as a trainer that you were hoping to see, then you can go back and reevaluate your programming and find out maybe where you're not doing something correctly, or is your client not being very compliant and doing things that is probably initiating some more of these compensations that maybe you didn't know about in the very beginning. So it's a good way to build rapport. It's a good way to make sure that stay on top of their programming. And I think at the very end, you're going to be super, super happy with the outcome. So I did want to put this up here. I know Ken had a totally different workshop. Again, I'm a huge, huge advocate for corrective exercise, guys. And if you get a chance to go and have HNFC, if you have them come and actually be able to teach you in person with one of their professionals, take them up on it, because I'm telling you, this information is something that once you actually feel it, you get a better appreciation of how important it is. So if you go to this shop down here, so HNFC.shop, you type in Wendy 50, you're going to get 50 euros off. I'm telling you guys, November 18th, you should sign up for this. And then I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Let me find myself here.
Here's my contact too, if y'all need it. So
perfect. Okay. Let's see the questions. I think there will be many questions here. Oh, yes, we have already. Okay. Let's start. In which height, how low, do you test athletes 1 repetition maximum on squat?
Oh, okay. So really good question. Again, when we're doing a 1 rep max for the squat, we're going to literally put them in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints again, and then I'm going to have them squat. Now, are we squatting? What are we squatting for? That's also going to be a question that I want to know, meaning, do I want to see how much they truly can squat? And I'm not worried about their position because they need that information for a sport. And if that's the case, remember, training for health and quality of movement is different than sport. And so what I mean by that is, if I have someone that is an Olympic lifter and I am their coach, I am going to turn their feet out. I'm going to widen their stance. I'm going to load that bar as heavy as they can, because I've shortened the amount of distance they need to go. It's a sport. Now that is terrible on your hips and your body. So my job as a trainer then is to take them out of that sport and work on making sure they've got good extensibility and range of motion in their ankles. So therefore, I'm making 100% sure my quad and my glute are firing, which are the prime movers to a squat. So when they go back to that positioning that's outside of the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, that I'm helping them long-term stay safe. So I'm going to, again, if I'm looking for just how much can they lift, I'm going to let them squat the way that they want. especially if the performance coach wants that information. But me as a professional that's trying to keep someone healthy, I'm going to put them in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints and tell them no matter what to squat to their chair height, because that's different. And if you do that, it's a longer range of motion that they have to go through. And it's a lot harder because I'm increasing the depth that they are going to have to go eccentrically into that load before they concentrically come up into that squat.
Next question is regarding the overhead squat assessment. So the question is how we know if it is a muscle weakness or a joint problem.
So if you're only doing the overhead squat, then what you're going to do is look at that solutions sheet, and it'll tell you foam roll these muscles and activate this one. And if you do just that, you're going to help somebody move better. Long term, you're going to help someone move better. If you want even more information to start really identifying, was it more of the overactivity or more of the weakness, then I would tell you to do the mobility squats in conjunction. So as well as what the overhead squat. And then if they pass or fail, you're going to know again which side you should spend more time on. Is it the rolling and the stretching or the activation side? Even though if you do both, it's a win-win either way.
So next question, should we explain to our clients how to do the overhead squat, for example, or should we leave them do it as they feel like doing it?
I love it. So this is my favorite question. And the answer is you want to have your client remove their shoes. Okay. Again, take away any support that they could have. And then you are going to put them in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. And then you're going to show them, I would like for you to raise your hands. And then I want you to demo one squat for them. So therefore they understand what it is you want them to do, because we always assume people know how to squat and we should never do that. So we're going to show them how to do it. And then we just tell them that we're going to take notes and you want them to squat down until you tell them to stop, or you can stop them and have them switch directions. I personally look at them. I move to the side, I move behind them. So I go in all 4, take notes, and then I have them stop. And then we move on to the other assessments. If you don't set them up in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints and you have them remove their shoes and they stand with their feet out and they stand with their weight to the side and you tell them to raise their arms and you don't set them up a certain way, you cannot really gather the information of where they started to deviate because they're already a hot mess before you started. So you want to make sure that you set them up correctly, and then you can start to see when the compensations occur or if they do at all. So that's why, people are like, if I set them up, they know what to expect. Your body cannot control standing within proper alignment, no matter how hard you try over time, especially someone that is new to exercise and they don't even know what you're looking for anyway.
Perfect. So let me say something in Greek. Παιδιά, αυτό το οποίο πρέπει να θυμάστε πάντα είναι το εξής, ότι υπάρχουν εμείς οι οποίοι είναι χαλαροί, υπάρχουν εμείς οι οποίοι είναι σε βράχυνση. Άρα ουσιαστικά η πιο εύκολη, ας το πούμε έτσι, λύση είναι ότι όταν κάνουμε μια αξιολόγηση πρέπει να γνωρίζουμε μερικά πράγματα από την κινησιολογία, την ανατομία, για να μπορούμε να καταλάβουμε ποιος μυς είναι αυτός ο οποίος είναι πιο δυνατός ή ποιος μυς είναι αντίστοιχα πιο χαλαρός. Και η γρήγορη λύση ποια είναι? Ότι στους βραχημένους μύες, αυτοί που είναι και πιο δυνατοί, συνήθως κάνουμε ουσιαστικά διάταση μέσα από ένα συγκεκριμένο κύκλο διατάσεων και προπόνησης. Σε αυτούς οι οποίοι είναι πιο αδύναμοι και χαλαροί, θα πρέπει να τους δυναμώσουμε, θα πρέπει να τους δώσουμε καλύτερο τόνο. Αυτό είναι πάρα πολύ γενικό και φυσικά καταλαβαίνετε ότι στο κομμάτι της διορθωτικής άσκησης τα πράγματα δεν είναι τόσο απλά, αλλά πρέπει να αρχίσουμε να μπαίνουμε σε μια συγκεκριμένη λογική και σε μια συγκεκριμένη φιλοσοφία. So, Wendy, another question is, how much does the corrective exercise cycle... Oh, no, this is for me.
That's for you. I don't know that answer.
Okay, so, yes. I was explaining that it is very, very crucial to understand how to assess, because without assessment, as you said, we are guessing. And how can we offer a personal training service if we don't create a specific assessment personalized for our client in order to understand what would be the right path, the right exercise path for him to make him get the benefits that he is expecting. So there is one more question.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask you how you deal with the muscle imbalances on pro athletes created as adaptations to the specific needs of the sports and ballast shoulders on throwers, boxers, etc. Do we try to fix them or consider them as adaptations to perform better?
So this is a great question. So out of college, I worked mainly with professional baseball players, and we did Tommy John rehab as well as labral tears, and we had to look at what caused some of these injuries to occur. And as you know, it's repetitive movement with incorrect joint alignment. Over time, that's what ends up happening. And so anytime I get an opportunity to work with, especially a pitcher, a tennis player, a golfer, even somebody that has one side dominant, guys, it's very important when you do the assessment to find out, is there an asymmetrical difference between their dominant side and their non-dominant side? And most of the time, the answer is yes. So my job as a corrective exercise specialist is to really try to gain more length into the overactive side and realign, especially in the shoulder, realign the proper joint alignment throughout that very shallow, because it's a ball and socket, that very shallow capsule. Because if not, and they're internally rotated, and then I have them try to go into external rotation to pitch, then over time, that wear and tear, because it's so overactive on that side, ends up causing injuries and could be career ending if it's something that we can't fix or we didn't get ahead of beforehand. So if you're working with that client, then what you're going to want to spend more time on, once you identified that it may be a shoulder that's out of alignment, is we spend more time on the posterior side to reactivate those muscles to get better alignment throughout that joint by opening up the front and strengthening the back. And so we want to look at where compensations are to try to get realignment back into the joint. And then we look at the opposing side, because if there's weakness on the other side and you're very one side dominant, your core is not producing the greatest amount of force, and neither is your hips or your glutes, which in a professional athlete, especially someone like a pitcher, you're getting your power from your hips and your glute, even though the arm is there that's making the delivery. And so we want to make sure that both sides of our glutes are firing correctly, that we do have what we call intervertebral stability, which are the small muscles within the spine are firing. So when we add the global movement, that our spine is in a good position and all the muscles to move things are working as optimally as possible. So therefore, they're going to be even more powerful. And so to put it in perspective, when you have somebody going through something like Tommy John and they can't use one side, and we strengthen the other side, when we actually put them through rehab, they came out faster, not because the actual joint was stronger, but because they had better muscular patterning on both sides to produce more force when they went back to their dominant side of throwing.
Perfect. Another question.
Okay.
When should we assess our pro athlete? In which phase?
The day they walk in the door is the day you assess them. So there's not really a phase. The phase is, guys, the thing is the athlete walks in the door based on their assessment. If there's compensations, you're going to start them in corrective exercise in phase 1, period. You're going to fix what's broken, and then you're going to put them up the model. You don't just pick a phase one day. And so we're trying to make sure we activate them correctly. So when we put them up the model, it's safe, it's effective, and it's going to efficiently produce that goal that you're trying to achieve long term.
So I think the question was that if someone has an athlete and has already designed the program, but he has not used any assessments in order to do it, okay? So he's asking, when should I start offering
Okay.
the assessment? I agree
So,
with that.
so is it, if you've already been working with an athlete or a client and now you realize you didn't assess, but you should, is that the question, Giannis?
Yes.
So maybe when you go back and see them the next time, you're going to ask them or say to them, hey, I'm going to make sure our programming is on the right path. I want you to take off your shoes, put your hands up, and I want you to do a couple squats for me. And then at that point to say, okay, perfect. And then maybe finish out that workout, but then go back home and write the program that they need, and then start sprinkling in some of that corrective and or stabilization stuff into what you're already doing. So it's not completely different, but at that point, maybe put them in a phase 2. So you're doing the strength that you have been, but now you're adding in the stabilization, because now it's something that they know with something that they need. And it's not that big of a change, but you're going to get better outcome.
So how often should we assess them?
So every 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, some people do it on the monthly. I'm constantly assessing by watching how they move, how they work, how they're producing an exercise. However, if I'm doing an actual formal assessment where I need to dictate to give, or, you know, to make documentation to give to my coaches or my athletes or whatever, then I reassess every 4 to 6 weeks. But if I notice that I have them doing, let's say, a front squat, but I notice now that they're actually doing something different, I'm going to shut that front squat down and do an alternative exercise, because I don't want to feed into that compensation. But then it also gives me a notice like, wait a minute, what's happening at their lat or what's happening at their hips that's causing that change that I haven't seen before. So assess every day, but do a formal assessment 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, αυτό το οποίο πρέπει να καταλάβουμε, παιδιά, επίσης είναι το εξής, ότι ο τρόπος με τον οποίο ο καθένας από τους ασκούμενους μας πραγματοποιεί την κάθε του άσκηση καθημερινά, αυτό για εμάς γίνεται αυτόματα μια αξιολόγηση. Άρα λοιπόν εμείς, εκτός από τη βασική αξιολόγηση, την οποία θα πρέπει να την κάνουμε ανατακτά χρονικά διαστήματα 4 με 6 εβδομάδες, ή όπως είπε η Wendy, ότι με το που ξεκινάμε να δουλεύουμε με κάποιον πρέπει να κάνουμε μια αξιολόγηση προκειμένου να μπορέσουμε να βρούμε το σωστό μονοπάτι άσκησης. Όταν θα κοιτάμε έναν ασκούμενο να κάνει την οποιαδήποτε άσκηση, μπορούμε κατευθείαν να καταλάβουμε, να κάνουμε να αξιολογήσουμε πώς ουσιαστικά ο εγκέφαλός του δίνει τα ρεθίσματα στο ομικό του σύστημα για να πραγματοποιήσει μία κίνηση. Μας κάνει αυτό που βλέπουμε? Δεν μας κάνει? Νιώθουμε ότι υπάρχει κάτι το οποίο μπορούμε να βελτιώσουμε? Αυτό από μόνο του είναι μία αξιολόγηση. So Wendy, I just said that every exercise can become an assessment for us. So besides the assessment that we need to do every 4 or 6 weeks, as you mentioned, every time we see a client of ours doing an exercise, we need to understand how he moves, what muscles he's using. So every exercise can become an assessment in order to understand better his movement and how we can help him do it better.
Absolutely. And the thing is that's why when we do any of the exercises, we're going to put them in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints. So if we start to see even deviations during, let's say, a chest press because they externally rotate that back foot, I'm going to try to fix that. But it also gives me the indication like, hey, we need to spend more time rolling and stretching the lateral gastroc that keeps wanting to push that foot out. So again, it's just always taking note of what you're seeing and then trying to address it either during the cool down, even if you didn't hit it in the beginning, because a little bit of something's better than a whole lot of nothing. So the more you start working on those compensations now, they're better they're going to be off like later on.
Perfect. So can you read the last question, which is big, so I prefer you to read it.
Oh, me? Okay. Yeah, let me pull up.
Can you see this?
That we were taught.
Yes,
is that
yes.
the one? Okay. We were taught in university that strength, hypertrophy, and all aspects of strength training in general throughout the 5 phases. Okay, so this is a very good question. So it's talking about how we calculate the 1 rep max. And again, one of the beauties of NASM, everything that we've done is based on science and research. So it wasn't that we came up with these random rep ranges to identify or to help us calculate where somebody is intensity wise. So when we give you the rep range, let's say of 1 to 5 in phase 4, then what we've done is we've said like 100 to 85%. So if you're doing 1 rep, it's 100%. If you're doing 5 reps, it should be 85%. And so we gave you some estimations by giving you the rep ranges of approximately what percentage that 1 rep max would be. And if I was in phase 1, I think it's 60 to 75% of 12 to 20. If I did 20 reps, it's only 60% of what somebody could do on a 1 rep max. So I know if I was to actually take them through a 1 rep max, I would want to add the load by another 40%. Instead of doing all these calculations, we give you rep ranges and the intensities to show where they're doing or where they are. Because again, I'm not going to be doing 85% of my 1 rep max at a 4-2-1 tempo. That doesn't make sense. So we do have a calculation box and a sheet that if you want to use, we've done those calculations for you, because to build strength in a 1 rep max, you need to have that calculation to know. But the general public doesn't care or need to know their 1 rep max. And it's not safe for somebody that's been a couch potato or haven't moved and it has been sedentary for 10 years to say, okay, let's do a 1 rep max today to see where you are, because we don't know how they move. We don't know if their joints can handle it. And we don't know too, if that's the safest bet. So if it's for an athlete, it's a totally different story. And safely, I know when I got to phase 5 or 4 that I could do that safely and to truly get their max. But in the interim, we would use those calculations that are in the documents that we have to help you if you had to determine what that is. That makes sense.
Λοιπόν, καταλαβαίνετε, δεν μπορούμε πάντα να μετράμε το απόλυτο one repetition maximum. Επειδή λοιπόν υπάρχουν πάρα πολλοί παράγοντες οι οποίοι μπορούν να επηρεάσουν την μέγιστη απόδοσή μας την ημέρα που θέλουμε να κάνουμε αυτή τη δοκιμή, ουσιαστικά μπορούμε να υπάρχουν κάποια sheets τα οποία μας λένε ότι αν κάνεις παραδείγματος χάρη 100 κιλά, 3 επαναλήψεις, τότε έχεις μία μέγιστη στα 115, ή αν κάνεις αντίστοιχα 20 επαναλήψεις στα 10 κιλά, τότε έχεις μία μέγιστη επανάληψη στα 15,5. Άρα λοιπόν πρέπει, όπως πολύ σωστά εδώ πέρα ανέφερε ο φίλος μας, όταν υπάρχουν τα adaptation, όταν υπάρχουν οι προσαρμογές, να κοιτάμε διαρκώς το πώς έχει αυξηθεί η δύναμη και οι προσαρμογές του ασκούμενού μας για να μπορέσουμε να του δώσουμε αυτό που πραγματικά χρειάζεται, αν μιλάμε πάντα για υπερτροφία ή για μέγιστη δύναμη. Okay, Wendy, I don't see any more questions.
I saw one, if you want me to answer it, it's super fast.
Yes,
Somebody asked about the difference between, or what I prefer for self-myofascial release.
Yes.
Just really quick, guys, we changed, if you notice, even looking at some of the NASM content, and if you start to read research, it's no longer self-myofascial release. We call it self-myofascial technique, because we've noticed in the research that they don't show exactly what's being released. However, we do know that it down-regulates activity. So you're going to see in all of our stuff moving forward that it's self-myofascial technique, because we know it works, but it has not shown what release is. So we want to stay up to date on that. But which is better, foam roller or something else? And the answer is to anything that the client's going to use. So foam rollers are cheaper. They're easier for people to learn on. And if you can teach them, that's great. If you want to start adding the vibration type therapy, that's going to increase activation or oxygen to the tissue. And that's going to help down regulate activity even better to get better length, but it's more expensive. Or if you want to do it utilizing one of the devices, that's fine as well. Just as long as you do it, it doesn't matter which one you use. Sorry, I'm done now.
Perfect, Wendy. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to have you here and share all this passion you have for corrective exercise and teaching and lecturing.
I love it.
Thank you very much. Παιδιά, ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Τελείωσε η πρώτη μέρα. Αύριο έχουμε άλλες 3 ώρες οι οποίες έχουν να κάνουν κυρίως με το strength and conditioning. 4 με 7 αύριο. Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ όλους που ήσασταν σήμερα εδώ πέρα. Θα προσπαθήσουμε να έχουμε το βίντεο για να το ανεβάσουμε το βίντεο και στο YouTube. Εύχομαι να τα καταφέρουμε. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. So good night and good morning for you. Good night for us.
Yes. Thanks, guys, so much. I appreciate everything.
Bye.